First of all, let me wish everybody a Happy New Year. Good to see you all here. Good crowd. You all looking good. Yeah. You all look beautiful. My name is Gerald Britt. I'm Vice President of External Affairs for City Square, and External Affairs is the group that sponsors this. Brand new year, a lot of new books, and I think that you all will enjoy both the books, of course, the presenter, and Randy Nayu, and the guests that we have coming up. I think I told you all after, or last year, at our last session, that we've got some changes going on in external affairs, and so we're looking forward to another good year. Some of you remember I told you Ashley has received a promotion. She is now Director of External Affairs, and so she's really running stuff.
I get emails from her all the time.
Yeah, including me.
Yeah, Gerald, do you now report to Ashley?
Yeah, I have to call in sick to her and and then we've got a couple of staff members with us. We've got, I always have to ask Chuck to pronounce his last name. Aputa. Chuck Aputa, who is our community organizer, so he's working with us in Oak Cliff, in South Dallas, and in other areas of the city, helping us to kind of maintain a presence there and make connections there. And then we've got Alex Thompson, who is, Alex is our, what's your title?
Manager of Advocacy, Outreach.
Something other like that. But he helps us get our message out. And so we're going to be doing a lot of different stuff. We're going to be doing podcasts and a lot of other different stuff to help us keep the message out there with regard to not just issues and programming here at City Square, but also other policy issues that we are concerned about, and we think that you ought to be concerned about as well. So this is going to be a busy year for us. We're looking forward to it. We've got a great guest lined up for us today, and I'll come back and introduce him a little later. But right now, Randy's going to come and do his usual fantastic job.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. You know, we've never actually covered the terrain on this, so I think that we're going to try to aim this year at getting finished between 118 and 122. How's that sound to you, Gerald? Somewhere around 120.
Can you be more specific?
I don't know. But we've never really set the parameters, and I know some of you have come from work and have to go back, but we're going to aim at 122. The second comment I want to make is that when you see a handout that looks like today, that means that I also did the book at an event called the First Friday Book Synopsis. So it's designed a little nicer. I'm going to be honest. I paid for that, and then normally you get just a Microsoft Word simple design. So I apologize about that. Warren, you're going to want a handout. So oh great, Ashley did that. Welcome. All right. Just for fun, raise your hand if you've never been here to an Urban Engagement Book Club. All right. Turn to each other, everybody turn to the person next to you and just answer this question. What happens at Urban Engagement Book Clubs? Everybody talk to each other, ready, go.
That's exactly it, right? Learning without reading. Like you read that book. Some of these books are probably not to learn about.
Oh, you know. Oh, did you see the movie? Oh, man, I want to go see it. Not yet. I've heard of it. I was telling Gerald about it. I also. No, not I'll tell you another thing. I went to see the National Museum.
Okay, now if I can have your attention back up here. And I have just another sentence or two before we get started. I discovered by going back through my computer files that the first handout that I could find for the Urban Engagement Book Club was delivered in May of 2004. Now, it is possible that we started before that, but that means we are finishing 15 years of monthly books about social justice. So that's just pretty amazing and pretty impressive. And I want to thank City Square for continuing this practice, and I want all of you to remember to give City Square some money regularly. So, because this is a great organization that does a lot of good. All right, I'm about to begin. I'm turning on my recorder, and he's recording. So here we go. So I'm going to do a couple of things as intro before we get to the handout. So I want everybody to think about $20. Picture in your mind $20. And now in your other hand, I want you to picture $1. So $1, $20. For an hour of work in 1965 and in the years before, the average worker for a company was paid $1, and the CEO of the company was paid $20. There was a gap of 20 to 1 from the 50s through about 1965. Today, here's the gap: $1 in the hand of the average worker, $361 in the hand of the CEO. That's a pretty firm statistic. It came from Forbes, and it was the average for 2017. And so we're talking about an enormous gap between the average worker and the CEO head class. All right, the second thing I want you to remember is that when that was happening, the 50s up to the mid-60s, there was a flourishing, building, growing, genuine, legitimate middle class. The United States was a middle-class country. And we have now reached the point where the wealthiest are growing, the poverty level is growing, but the middle class is shrinking. And that is one of the enormous difficulties in the United States and really in other parts of the world. So that's kind of the background to that. And now my second introduction before we get to the handout. This is a direct quote from the most significant influencer on the conservative side of economics. His name is Milton Friedman. If you don't know anything about Milton Friedman, he was the person in conservative economics. And he said, quote, "There is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits, so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say, engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud." Now that's the full quote, but it is most commonly quoted this way: there is one and only one social responsibility of business: to increase its profits. And we've got a problem. And I want to admit a problem. And it's a legitimate problem. If a business does not make a profit, the business is out of business. And we have to understand that. If I open a hamburger stand and I am spending more money on hamburger meat and hamburger buns and labor costs, people who work there, than I am in bringing in money, then I'm going to have to go out of business. And we have seen some entities go out of business. I'm an old guy. I bought my first stereo at Montgomery Ward's. Long gone. I buy I bought every car battery I have ever owned at Sears. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I assume nobody else sells car batteries. So we have to understand that it is a legitimate concern that a business has to make a profit. So after saying that, I think it is safe to say that there have been some businesses that have been a little overboard on the amount of profit they wanted to make. And so that's the ongoing battle. All right, now we're going to the handout. The name of the book is Winners Take All. It is written by a man, and I think I'm saying this correctly, named Anand Giridharadas. And it is subtitled The Elite Charade of Changing the World. And I'm going to do my best to tell you what I think he's saying in this book. Then we're going to look at what he actually says in the book. Here's what he's saying. He's saying that there are these people who have made a lot of money. People like Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. And they make a lot of money. And they've got a lot of money. And then they go to conferences. They give talks at TED Talks, and they go to Davos. And they start saying, it is our job with all this money to help people get better off. And Bill Gates is really doing a good job on that. He's helping people in multitudes of ways, and he's a thinking reader, and I like Bill Gates. But what Giridharadas says is, here's the problem. You can't make your money in a way that hurts people and then make it up with philanthropy. And that's what he's saying. And the problem is that the way they make their money is actually creating worsening conditions. And let me encourage all of you to not right this second after our session is over. Take your phone out and look at Anand Giridharadas' Twitter feed. And his Twitter feed is something. Today he lambasted Mark Zuckerberg. And he does not withhold his opinion. And he is very clear about what he thinks. And so, with that understanding, let's turn to the front page. I want to make sure okay. Your front page, and is it labeled page 2? Good. Our page numbers are the same. What Ashley did was took away my cover sheet. So that's what she did. All right. On the left, on the bottom, what is the point? Many very wealthy, well-meaning people are seeking to change the world by helping people, but as they seek to do good, they ignore correcting the bad. If you could find a way to circle that, circle that. They ignore correcting the bad. This may be their great big failure. Now, from this point on, I'm pretty much saying what's in the book. So if there's something that I say for a while that you don't like, you can't get mad at me. You got to get mad at this guy. Okay? So it's all from the book. All right, on the right. Why is this book worth our time? There is a new generation of very wealthy people aiming to change the world for the better. Are they being honest, successful? This book will help you think about these issues. Number 2. This book is what is government for? What is business for? What is success for? Big think book. It is worth pondering such questions. This book will help you do that. And number 3, this book will remind you that the world of work has truly changed and will continue to change, and how will these changes impact the common people. Now let me pause and say that he is in agreement with other books that I am reading, and here's what these books are saying. We ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to technology and algorithms and software replacing human jobs. And this is going to be an enormously difficult problem to deal with as a society. I go to Kroger. I shop at Kroger. It's in Richardson. It's on Spring Valley or Centennial. I forget the streets go together. And basically, I would give my left arm for a human being to check me out. I have to check myself out. I have to use some gizmo. I want somebody, if I'm going to go shop in your store, I want somebody to check you out. But the problem, of course, is that now the jobs for the lesser educated checking people out are going to begin disappearing at an alarming rate. Ashley, I don't know, was Ashley still in here? Where's Ashley?
She's just
All right.
here.
Anyway, I use something called Constant Contact. And I paid about 2 years ago $99 that was paid to some human being to design a template for me. 2 weeks ago, I got an email from Constant Contact and said, try our new template maker. And I clicked on a button, and somehow some little human being, very tiny inside the computer, ran over and looked at my website and picked up all the colors and came back, and 20 seconds later, I had 3 templates to choose from that were no additional cost to me, and they were far better than what I had paid $99 for. That's an algorithm and software replacing human work. Okay, for the next few pages, we have direct excerpts from the book, quotes, the best of Randy's highlighted passages. I encourage you to read all of these on your own, but for right now, keep your eyeballs with me. Number 4, illiteracy has remained stubbornly in place, and the fraction of Americans who read at least one work of literature a year has dropped by almost a quarter in recent decades. A very well-educated retired SMU teacher said to me yesterday that his granddaughter said to him, "Why would anyone ever read a newspaper?" That was her line. All right. And now they're not reading books or newspapers. Number 7, rich American men who tend to live longer than the average citizens of any other country now live, this is breathtaking, 15 years longer than poor American men, who endure only as long as men in Sudan and Pakistan. We literally have third world health in a first world country based on economic disparity. That's breathtaking. Turn to page 3, number 13, and there are many of these that I'm going to have to skip. Conferences and ideal festivals sponsored by plutocrats and big business host panels on injustice and promote thought leaders who are willing to confine their thinking to improving the lives within the faulty system rather than tackling the faults. Here's what they're saying. He's got a great section, and I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, about a TED Talk that is the second or third most TED Talk ever viewed. It's by Amy Cuddy. It's a very good TED Talk, and it is Your Body Language Shapes Who You Are. And what he really says about her TED Talk is, she is talking about the problems of feminism, and she says you fix it by learning to stand up better. And what she should be saying is, you men are treating women badly, but you can't get away with that at a TED Talk. So it's a very interesting section. All right, number 14. The elites behind efforts like these often speak in a language of changing the world and making the world a better place, yet we are left with the inescapable fact that in the very era in which these elites have done so much to help, they've continued to hoard the overwhelming share of progress. The average American's life has scarcely improved, and virtually all of the nation's institutions, with the exception of the military, have lost the public trust. There is no denying that today's elite may be among the most socially concerned elites in history, but it is also, by the cold logic of numbers, among the more predatory in history. Circle the word predatory. By refusing to risk its way of life, by rejecting the idea that the powerful might have to sacrifice for the common good, it clings to a set of social arrangements that allow it to monopolize progress and then give symbolic scraps to the forsaken, many of whom wouldn't need the scraps if the society were working right. Do you realize that there are people now, right now, today now, who are not getting paid and maybe not going to work because of the government, and they're eating food from food pantries, and they are not able to go get their medicine for their children. Well, somebody with money never worries about getting medicine for the children. And so the gap is growing. Number 15. This book is an attempt to understand the connection between these elites' social concern and predation, between the extraordinary helping and the extraordinary hoarding, between the milking and perhaps abetting of an unjust status quo and the attempts by the milkers to repair a small part of it. The slightly more critical view is that this elite-led change is well-meaning but inadequate. This guy's cutting no slack to rich people doing nice things. No slack. Number 17. We should recall Oscar Wilde's words about such elite helpfulness being not a solution, but an aggravation of the difficulty. Just as the worst slave owners were those who were kind to their slaves, and so prevented the horror of the system being realized by those who suffered from it, and understood by those who contemplated it, so in the present state of things in England, the people who do most harm are the people who try to do most good. I have made a personal decision that I will no longer just kind of bat an eye and tolerate it when somebody says to me, as somebody did a few months ago, Randy, don't you know there were good slave owners? I'm just not going to let that go by anymore. So, anyway, number 23. What is at stake is whether the reform of our common life is led by governments elected by and accountable to the people, or rather by wealthy elites claiming to know our best interests. It's been true for as long as I've been alive and longer, but if you give enough money, you get a phone call return from your senator. And if you don't, you don't. And that's the reality. Number 27. Put a star beside 27, I like it. The only truly ultimate good is human flourishing. Yeah. All right, turn the page, and again, I'm skipping over some that I've even marked to read aloud. Okay, 32. Margaret Thatcher echoed Ronald Reagan in saying, quote, there is no such thing as society. There are individual men and women, and their families, and no government can do anything except through people, and people must look to themselves first. And so any suffering is the part of the sufferer, the blame of the sufferer. All right? Number 38. These elites believe and promote the idea that social change should be pursued principally through the free market and voluntary action, not public life and the law and the reform of the systems that people share in common, that it should be supervised by the winners of capitalism and their allies and not be antagonistic to their needs, and that the biggest beneficiaries of the status quo should play a leading role in the status quo's reform. Ask the wealthy to talk about what the wealthy should do better. So that's the idea. Number 39, and this is where it gets touchy. Obama may favor McKinseyite in much the same way as his predecessor seemed addicted to hiring alumni of Goldman Sachs. What that's saying is that Obama equally was impressed by people who came out of big money circles. Very big money circles. Number 42. Circle the phrase market world. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes. The market world problem solver does not tend to hunt for perpetrators and is not interested in blame. Number 55. Today's philanthrocapitalists When people invent words, they're hard to say. Today's philanthrocapitalists see a world full of big problems that they, and perhaps only they, can and must put right. I alone can put this right. Number 56. And so, if you took a whiteboard, they have some circles. One circle was labeled, better for me, self-interest. I'm going to make money this way. The other was labeled, better for the world, broader interest. And when they can overlap, it's labeled exponential opportunity. So there's a story in the book about an app that helped people manage their too little money so that they could get in less trouble from it. And the guy who came up with the app charged $280 a year for the app. So they had to pay $280 to help with their money, and that guy was getting rich. So it was a nice thing to do, but he was getting rich on it. Okay. Number 57. I should have put this one in bold. Put a star beside 57. The government works not as a check on capitalism, but the government works for capitalism, to make capitalism successful, to ensure that the conditions for its success are in place, that there is a decent education system to produce the requisite number of workers, that trade agreements get written so as to allow companies to buy from and sell to far-off places, that the infrastructure allows trucks to get produce to the supermarket before it rots, that the air is clean enough that people live long and, more important, productive lives. Turn the page. I'm already getting short of time. Number 60. What is the win-win theory's response to the problem of suffering? Suffering can be innovated away. Let the innovators do their startups and suffering will be reduced. But people will be left behind. Look at number 63. It's a big one. A guy named Khosla, a billionaire venture capitalist, believed that 7 or 8 out of 10 people in the not too distant future might not have steady work available to them. To him, this coming future was both an entertainment problem, how could we occupy the minds of all those people, and a political one, how would we keep them from revolting? The thing that could stave off social unrest, he said, is if, big if, we do enough redistribution. Enough redistribution, if we handle minimum standards of living for everybody where they work when they want to work, not because they need to work. He knew that such redistribution could cost people like him dearly in the form of higher taxes, but it was a good investment, he felt. To put it crudely, it's bribing the population to be well enough off. Otherwise, they'll work for changing the system, okay? So that's the idea. Now, let me go back to this great big problem about where will people work. It's a big problem. In the latest book by Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote Sapiens, of Homo Deus, and now 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, he says, in the coming decades, people will become useless. They won't be needed. They won't be needed to check stuff out. They won't be needed to make stuff. They will become useless. And he said, somebody, and by the way, he is popular in Silicon Valley as a speaker, somebody's got to figure out what are we going to do when the people are useless. All right, turn to page 8. Number 76. Oxfam said that just 62 billionaires possessed as much wealth as the bottom half of humanity. 62 people, as much wealth as 3.6 billion people. Down from 300 billionaires just a few years ago. All right. Number Number 79, Amy Cuddy, the TED Talk woman on power posing, didn't see the isms going away, the sexism, the mistreatment of people. And so she didn't see them going away, so she was giving, her phrase, tiny tweaks to help people survive. And then everybody circle number 88 and put a star beside it. Real change can require being against things.
That was 81.
What's that? 81. 81. Real change can require being against things. All right, we're going to take 45 seconds, turn to the person next to you and say, here's the quote that grabbed me. Ready, go. Everybody talk. 45 seconds.
That's the one that always never fails to make me cringe. The other one
Wilson was Chicago. What is it? University of Chicago.
Yeah. University of Chicago. And there are interesting things about okay, let me have your attention. Let's turn to page 9. I'm going to go pretty quickly. Here we go, page 9. Remember the name of the book, Winners Take All, The Elite Charade of Changing the World. By the way, this book says that's not good. And there's a book by Peter Thiel. Anybody ever use PayPal? Oh, yeah. Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and one other person founded PayPal. Peter Thiel has a book called 0 to 1. It is a book in favor of winners taking all. And he says that we are going from somebody who has an idea to being the one and only provider, 0 to 1. And dare I say this? Well, just check into Thiel's politics. I'll just stop there. Okay. All right. All right. Thiel, Peter Thiel. And I've got my handout to 0 to 1 available on my website. Okay, on the left. If you have an understanding of the world that's currently faulty, how are you going to find that out? That's a great question written by Danny Roderick in Winners Take All. All right, on the right. Let's start here. Let's not pass judgment on motive. What I mean by that is, it is possible to want the best for people, to be well-meaning, but to be very wrong. So these wealthy people have good motives. It's just that they may be wrong. And so let's not pass judgment on motive. I'm very nervous about ever passing judgment on motive. And yes, it is also possible to be selfish jerks or to become corrupted and or to become willfully blind. Maybe they are really bad, but they could be good. And let's remember the law of unintended consequences. Consider opioids. They started out as a good idea, and then the unintended consequences were bad. Here's an example. The unintended consequence of being a Dallas Cowboys fan is that you are perpetually disappointed. Okay. Some stories. There's a great story about a poor, gay, African-American boy who got all of the right help at the right time. And he ended up in good education and in good connections, and he became the head of the Ford Foundation. He's His name is Darren Walker, and it's a very compelling story, but it's because of help that he got in government programs and help that is not as widely available today. So that was an interesting story. There's the feminist gender researcher who opted for the tiny tweaks in her TED Talk, and that's her phrase. This is Amy Cuddy, the power posing woman. And the reason I know so much about her is I show her video in my speech class every semester. It's a really good video. And she found out, this is a really blunt section. She found out if she stood up and said to an audience, "Y'all are mistreating women," she wouldn't make any money. And so she changed her talk, his implication, and discovered there's more money to be made with the tiny tweaks approach than with the diagnose and name the problem approach. Put a star beside that. That is a profoundly important observation. All right, more than a few really good students from really good schools, some with some family money, trying to figure out how to make a difference, with more than a few choosing the business skills, then to the social good path. What he's saying is that there are people with money who are coming out saying, how can I help? But they're taking an approach that doesn't deal with what's harming people. The shocking pronouncement of Michael Porter and Mark Kramer in an essay called Creating Shared Value. For those of you who know business, Michael Porter is big. Big. And so he said, companies had become too focused on optimizing short-term financial performance. And then who will own the app? And it's the potential promise of Up and Go for house cleaners in New York, where the workers keep 95% of the income. Somebody came up with an Uber for house cleaners, but instead of keeping the money, they paid the expenses and gave the house cleaners 95% of the money. That's a model that works. All right? What is the problem? Well, if you're rich and wealthy, there is no problem. If you're not, there are many, many problems. The elite market world, this is his phrase. Market world is an ascendant power elite that is defined by the concurrent drives to do well and to do good. Circle that phrase. It's the phrase you'll hear from them. Do well and do good. To change the world while also profiting from the status quo. Market world is a network and community, but it is also a culture and state of mind. They have their conferences, TED, Aspen, Clinton Global Initiative. Elite networking forums like the Aspen Institute and the Clinton Global Initiative groom the rich to be self-appointed leaders of social change, taking on the problems people like them have been instrumental in creating or sustaining. They have their own neighborhoods, their own clubs, their own gated communities, even gated protected discos. I give money every month to 90.1 KPRA. Do any of you who listen to them feel just a tinge of, I don't know about this, when they have the something round table where you get to eat with the big folks for $10,000? Well, I haven't given them $10,000, so I don't get to eat with them. There is this closing of the circle among the rich. And if anybody in here from KURA, you're still going to get my money. All right, page 10. Some vocabulary choice insights. What he says is people are choosing to go for the positive, not for the negative. And so they talk about fairness, but they don't use the words that are more adequately and accurately describing the problem, which is equality and social justice. In other words, if you use the language, NBC had a debate this weekend over whether or not to call Representative King a racist or not.
I know he is.
He's a racist. And they finally said, we're going to use the word racist. And so he went to Silicon Valley, one of the people where he became one of the leading advisors to technology entrepreneurs wishing to make a difference in the world. That was when he was told to stop using the phrase social justice. In Silicon Valley, the phrase rub people the wrong way. That's really a profound insight. Maybe the question is, does the business management approach provide the only solution to follow? McKinsey. Who is on your board? Hint, add a few non-elite folks to the board. The people in need of the work of the organization. The current curious career path of those seeking to change the old ways. First you go for management, and then you go work at some nonprofit. The age-old youthful impulse to reimagine the world was now often molded and guided, now this is important, by one of the reigning ideas of the age, that if you really want to change the world, you must rely on the techniques, resources, and personnel of capitalism. So they merged two goals to change the world and make a profit. So here's what they're saying. If a young idealistic person wants to change the world, if they first go into management and finance, that shapes their thinking with management and finance. And then they use that when they go try to help people. What if they started serving with the community organizer back here instead of going to finance? There would have a different worldview. All right, this is a profound book. All right. Here's a question. If you make money in a bad way, can you make it up with generous philanthropy? And America has always believed in that. The robber barons of old built the libraries. So, all right. The fallacy of win-win, there is not always a win-win. Some contrast, charity versus justice. The thought leader versus public intellectual. It is the best of times for thought leaders. And he really lambasts an author named Charles Duhigg, and I hated that section because I really like Charles Duhigg. But he basically says Charles Duhigg was writing about more important stuff, then he wrote a couple of books to make some money. Now that's my summary of what he said about Duhigg, and he's a good writer. And then he talks about the birth of the B Corp. All right, turn to page 11. I got to wrap up. Here are my 6 lessons and takeaways. Number 1, choosing a career path that provides meaning and success without adding to the gaping divide between people is no easy task. But thinking about that gap should be part of one's what do I do with the rest of my life considerations. Number 2, maybe providing just the positive wins without dealing with the why there are losses, why there are losers rather than winners, is not the approach to follow. What are we doing to make losers? Number 3, your table needs to have a seat for those on the other end of the spectrum. I mean, literally at the table so they can be heard. Number 4, the greater the gap, the more help will be needed. Maybe we need to restore some of the impact of government from earlier decades to help provide the help. Number 5, beware of narrowness, the arrogance of the one answer, and arrogance which could come from such narrowness. And number 6, Silicon Valley elites and other elites are probably not the wise solution providers that they think they are and that we may think them to be. They certainly should not be the only voices in the room. Winners take all, the elite charade of changing the world. Hope you found this useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. He's getting us all.